Happy Friday! Take a couple of seconds, pause if you need to so you can figure out what the MDI is. Alright, we're just solving for x. We know that the length of the whole segment, xz, is equal to 23. And we also know that if we add these two segments together, it gives us the whole segment. So we have x minus 6 plus 2x minus 10. All of that is equal to 23. And again, we don't really need to write this with parentheses, but I just want you to see one segment plus another segment equals the whole thing. 2x minus 10 equals 23. First, you want to start off by combining like terms. So x plus 2x is 3x, and we have a negative 6 and a negative 10, which is a negative 16, equal to 23. So we add 16 to both sides. 3x is equal to 39. And divide both sides by 3. So x is equal to 13. If we wanted to figure out what each one of these segments is, we would just take this and plug it back in. So we would do 13 minus 6 is equal to 7. So this side over here would be 7 from here to here. And then 7 plus what gives us 23, so we know that this length over here should be 16. All right, take a couple of seconds, pause the lunch if you need to. There's a note sheet for today, so if you guys want to grab your note sheet right now, that would be a good idea too. Write down what your definition of parallel lines is in 2 to 3 sentences. Alright, parallel lines are lines in the same plane that never intersect. And the part that's really important with this, well, there's two things that are important. One is that they're in the same plane, because we also have these lines called skew lines that never intersect. So if you just put lines that never intersect, we could also be talking about skew lines. So it's really important that you define this as lines in the same plane that never intersect. And it's hard for me to tell you about that on a video, so I apologize. I'll tell you later if it comes up. All right, if you need to pause, pause. Write down your section, your title, and your learning goal. Today's the 29th, I think. So today we just want to talk about what happens when parallel lines are cut by a transversal. And we talked a little bit about this on Tuesday before I left. So if you guys have that note sheet, we're going to start off with that. So this is what happens when parallel lines are cut by a transversal. And remember, a transversal is a line that intersects two or more lines. So here's your transversal, 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 transversal. All right, so same side interior angles are interior angles on the same side of the transversal. And we talked about this before. So our examples of same side interior angles would be 4 and 6 and 3 and 5. We also talked about the relationship between same-side interior angles. So 3 and 5 are not congruent, but they are supplementary, which means they add up to 180. So as an example down here, let me slide this up a little bit, okay? We know that these two angles right here are same side interior. So we know that if we take 3x plus 60, we get 180 degrees. So 3x plus 60 is 180. If we subtract the 60 from both sides, we get 3x is equal to 120. Divide by 3, and x is equal to 40. Then to find out what this angle is, we can just say 3 times 40 is 120. The other way that we can get this one is, if we want to figure out what x is, we could also say, well, I know that 60 plus 120 is equal to 180. So if I do 120 is equal to 3x, I can find x that way too. Okay, again, this is not the degree, this is just what x is. All right, over here we talked about corresponding angles too. Corresponding angles have corresponding positions where you could put matching. Relative to the transversal. So if you remember on Tuesday we talked about putting a window around this set and putting a window around this set, and if you take this set and put it on top, which ones would line up? So corresponding angles are congruent. Always, always, always. So as an example down here at the bottom of your page, you have 63 degrees here and 2x plus 1. If we wanted to solve for x, we know that these two are both going to be 63. So we can just do 2x plus 1 is equal to 63 degrees. Subtract 1. 2x is equal to 62. Divide by 2, x is equal to 31. And again, this is not an angle, this is not degrees, this is just what x is equal to. And the reason that we set this equal to 63 is because these are corresponding angles, so we know that they have to be equal to one another. They are congruent. All right, next thing we're going to talk about, alternate interior angles. Alternate interior angles are non-adjacent angles that lie between the lines, interior, on the same side of the transversal. Oh, I'm sorry, alternate, that lie on the opposite sides. My mistake. Sides of the transversal. So our alternate interior angles would be 3 and 6, 4 and 5. And we talked about the relationship on Tuesday. So alternate interior angles, again, always, always, always congruent. So in the example, we have 139 and 3x. These are alternate interior angles. That means that their degrees have to be the same. So if we wanted to find out what x is, we would set those equal to each other, divide by 3. Let's see, what is that? 3 goes into 13 4 times, 19, 6 point something. Hold on, 139 divided by 3, 46.3, repeating. Again, not the degrees, just what x is equal to. All right, alternate exterior angles, again, non-adjacent angles that lie outside the lines on opposite sides of the transversal. So alternate exterior angles here would be 1 and 8 and 2 and 7. And again, we talked about the relationship, alternate exterior angles are always congruent. So again, we have alternate exterior angles here. We know that they're congruent, so their angle measures are the same. So if we wanted to solve for x, we would do 101 is equal to 2x plus 1. Subtract 1. 2x is equal to 100. Divide by 2. This one I can do. X is equal to 50. Again, not the degrees, just what x is equal to. And we don't have to plug this one in because we know that the angle measure is going to be 101. We just need to figure out what x is. Okay. So if we have two parallel lines cut by a transversal, there are several relationships between the angles created. We talked a lot about these on Tuesday. You should already have them in your notes. If you don't have them in your notes, what I would do is take what's inside the red box and I would put it into your notes. I would highlight it, I would star it, maybe a few unicorns. Okay, in the example, we have some angles that are congruent and then some angles that are congruent to other angles. So what angles here are congruent? Take a couple of seconds, just jot it down on your paper which angles you think are congruent to each other. All right, so let's look at this. Maybe we'll slide jump just a little bit so we can see the red here. All right, 1 and 4 are vertical angles, so we know that angle 1 is congruent to angle 4. We also know that 1 and 5 are corresponding angles, and corresponding angles are congruent, so that means that 1 is also congruent to 5. And if 1 is congruent to 4, that means that, if 1 and 4 are congruent to each other and 1 is congruent to 5, it means that 4 is also congruent to 5 by the transitive property. I need my angle symbol in here. Angle 5. And we also know that 5 and 8 are vertical angles, and vertical angles are congruent, so we can also say that angle 8 is congruent. So angles 1, 4, 5, and 8 are all congruent to each other. And by the same process, 2 and 3 are vertical angles. And we know that 2 and 6 are corresponding angles, and corresponding angles are congruent. So we can also say that 2 and 3 are also congruent to 6, angle 6. And angle 6 and angle 7 are vertical angles. And so we can also put angle 7 in there. All right, we want to find the measure of each angle and we want to justify our answers. So we just have to say, these would be kind of back here, these would be the justifications for our answers. We could say, like, for example, if we're looking for the measure of angle 1, okay, measure of angle 1 is down here. We're only given one angle measure, but we should be able to find all the other 7 just from that one. So if we know that this is 50, we know that this is a corresponding angle, so the measure of angle 50 is congruent to angle 1. So measure of angle 1 is 50 degrees by corresponding angles. So what I want you guys to do is just take another minute or so, pause the video if you need to, do 2, 3, 4, and 5. See if you can figure out what each one of those angles are equal to. All right, measure of angle 2. Okay, measure of angle 2 is an alternate interior angle with this angle right here. And we know that same side interior. And we know that same side interior angles add up to 180. So the measure of angle 2 has to be 130 degrees because it's same side interior with the 50-degree angle. All right, the measure of angle 3 corresponds with 2. It's also same side interior with angle 1, which was corresponding with this one. So it's 130 degrees, so they're saying that it's corresponding with angle 2. You could also have the justification that it's same side interior with angle 1, same as you had up here. Measure of angle 4, because these are vertical angles, you could say that 3 and 4 are congruent. You could also say that these are alternate interior angles. That would be another justification that would be valid. And angle 5. So a couple of different ways that you can think about this one. It's vertical angles with number 1. It's also alternate interior angles with the 50 up here. So it should be a 50-degree angle. So some of these you have more than one justification that you could have used. You only have to use one justification. All right, and last but not least, we want to find out what the value of x is and then find the measure of each labeled angle. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to decide what kind of angles these are and what their relationship is. So if we look at these two, they're on the same side of the transversal and they're on the inside of the line. So that means that they're same side interior. Okay, and we know that same side interior, if we pop back here a couple of pages, same side interior angles add up to 180 degrees. So we know that these are supplementary. Okay? So that means that when I add these two together, it has to give us 180. So if we do x, that's one angle, plus x plus 40, it has to add up to 180 degrees. So we don't really need the parentheses. X plus 40 equals 180. First thing we want to do is combine our like terms. And this is really a 1x here, and this is really a 1x here. So we've got 2x plus 40 equals 180. Subtract out the 40. So 2x is equal to 140. Divide by 2. X is equal to 70. So now what we know is that x is equal to 70. In this case, x is the degree, so this angle right here is 70 degrees. And because we know that these two add up to 180, we know that 70 plus this is equal to 180. And we can also plug this in. 70 plus 40 is 110 degrees. So this angle is 110, this is 70. All right, next example. First thing we need to do is figure out what kind of what kind of angle pairs these are and what the relationship is between those two angles. So if we look here, they can't be anything with alternate because they're on the same side of the transversal, but they can't be same side interior because this one is outside the line and this one is inside the line. So they must be corresponding angles. And if we pop back a couple of pages, we know that corresponding angles are congruent. So what we have to do is we need to set these two angles equal to one another. So we have 3x minus 10 equal to x plus 40. So we subtract out the x from both sides because we want to start with the smallest variable. And so we get 2x minus 10 equals 40, and then this is just a regular two-step equation. So add 10. 2x is equal to 50. Divide by 2. X is equal to 25. We're not finished yet, though. We have to figure out what this angle measure is. So I'm going to take this one, and I'm going to plug it into this one because that's an easier one to figure out. you just have 25 plus 40, which this means this is 65. And because these are corresponding angles and they're congruent, that means that this one is also 65 degrees. That's it. Make sure you put this on your green sheet before you leave. I'll check it on Monday. I believe we have a CFA coming up soon. I will let you know on Monday. It's possible that it's next Friday, but I'll let you know for sure on Monday when I'm back. If you guys have any questions about anything that you went over this weekend or this week, just send me an email and I will try to get back to you. Have a good weekend.